Hey guys, this is chess coach Andrew Rankin. Welcome back to the series Buffing Your Black Repertoire. Today I want to show you how to A, make London players hate you from the opening, B, get equality really fast, and C, most likely outplay them. So the London starts with d4. I play d5. If you want to play c6, you can actually do so. c6, so d4, you can play c6 and transpose into this position. But I played d5, the main line. Bishop goes to f4, and now I played c6. And the idea behind c6, you can see that, actually maybe you can't see it, but on the side where it has top level games, this is played by Vasily Ivanchuk, Grishuk, Maxime Bashir-Lagrave, MVL, Fabiano Caruana. So it's been played at the highest level, so it's by no means dubious. In fact, it's the recommended response by Grandmaster Alex Kolovich, which I really like because I've been studying his course on the Shebenenko Slav. So this is for all the Slav players out there. So my opponent continues with e3, and we play queen b6, and this is the main idea. If the bishop's going to leave the defense of the b pawn, then let's put pressure on it right away. My opponent plays queen c1. Another option is b3. I should note, if b3, your opponent is going to play c4 and e4. If queen to c1, your opponent is going to play c4, c5. So queen c1 says my opponent's going to play on the queen side, and if pawn to b3, it says my opponent is going to play in the center. So their response to the queen b6 move is very telling as to what they're going to play in the middle game. So we continue by developing our light square bishop. Ideally, we get a position like this where we trade it off and we're just happy. Now my opponent plays knight to d2. I continue with knight to f6. Knight goes to f3. And I play knight b to d7. So far the position is very symmetrical. You notice that black is almost playing a reverse London. The difference is that we have a pawn on c6. He has a pawn on c2, which means he can play c4 in one go. But his queen is on c1, which is a little bit misplaced. Now he goes bishop to e2. Let me turn off those notations. And I play bishop to h6. The computer doesn't really love this move, but I thought that it made sense. And the idea was to stop knight h4. But the reason why h6 is not so good is because we still have e6, bishop e7 before we really need to play h6. Because if, for example, we play e6 and he goes knight here, I can go forward or I could go back. And if he takes, I take. And all of a sudden, this bishop is actually very uncomfortable because the rook is open. So, for example, if we play knight here, he can't go to g3 because we take, and he has to take with the f-pawn, and all of a sudden our queen is getting very strong on this long diagonal. So I think my move h6 was a little bit premature. So now my opponent plays the move h3, and we've actually transposed into some really high-level games, so there's nothing wrong with playing like this. And now I played the move e3, he castled, I played bishop e7, preparing to castle myself, and he plays c4, and this makes a lot of sense. Like I said, he's going to play c5, b4, b5, and try and break through on the queen side, but that's going to take a long time. So I castled. The computer says that this is not so great. Apparently, I'm supposed to play knight to e4, because right now the position is already equal, so black gained equality really early on. And apparently I'm supposed to play knight to e4, but I castled, and now I guess white has a slight advantage, but I think we're perfectly fine here, especially since my opponent gave back the advantage immediately. So we put the knight on e5, and the whole point of this setup is to play the move e5 ourselves. So we need to get rid of the piece on e5. He takes with the bishop, and we drop the knight back so that we can kick him out and eventually prepare the move e5. So he drops the bishop back, and I play bishop to f6. Once again, preparing e5. The computer, however, says, well, you might as well break with c5. The reason why I didn't play c5 was because I don't like playing with the isolated pawn. But I guess this is absolutely fine because the bishop goes to f6. And we actually have a tremendous amount of pressure on the queen side. So that's really good to know, just in case I get this variation in the future. but I played bishop f6. Again, just preparing e5. He plays c5. Queen goes back to d8, very normal development. And the idea is to bring a rook and the queen all to put pressure on this file. And we end up with a pawn structure that's going to be pointing at the king side, so that's where we're going to want to play. So now my opponent plays knight to f3, hoping to put a piece here and stop me from pushing the pawn. So I put the rook on e8. He put the knight in, and it's not really clear what his plan is. It's like he's just like throwing his pieces at me, and then I can just take them. And so since black has less space, it doesn't really make sense for white to play this way. So I played knight takes, he played bishop takes, pawn takes, and now we can just play f6, break at the center. He correctly plays queen to c3, which defends the pawn and defends his c5 pawn. Now I don't really want to take, because when he takes back with the queen, I can't really play queen f6, because then I have to take with the g pawn. I guess I could and play on the open g file and threaten like bishop takes h3 in the future, but I decided to just prepare with rook f8. He pushes b4. I take, queen takes, and now queen here. He could play queen to d6 or queen to c7. If he goes queen to c7, I'll just play rook f7 and then bring the other rook over to f8. And if he puts the queen on d6, I think I can just push the pawn and attack him anyway. So he probably realized that his queen's not really making any progress, and he takes. And I take with the rook. And I think now really it's black's game. White is waiting. I don't think white really has any ideas. And now it's really black who gets to attack. So my opponent put his rook on c1, and I doubled up. Now my idea is simply to push the pawns and try and attack any weaknesses over here. So he decides to trade the bishops. Clearly my opponent did not enjoy this opening and is not having fun, and he's trying to bail out into a draw. But after bishop takes, pawn takes, he has doubled pawns very unnecessarily. I mean, this bishop was fine. He could have dropped it back and traded it off this way, which made more sense to me. And now these doubled pawns is just going to be something that I can target. So I push the pawn to e5 because I don't want him to expand with f4. He pushes his pawn to f3, and I decide to bring my king. The idea is that I'm going to bring my king up here so that when I can play the move e4, he can never push, because then he drops the g pawn. So that's my plan. He goes rook here, and now I have a choice of going to g6 or e6. The computer really likes e6, but I went to g6. He goes king to f2, and I push my king to f5, and my idea is actually to get really crazy and aggressive. And after he goes here, I push e4. He can't really take, so he can't take because I'll trade off the rooks, and we'll end up in this endgame, which is not good for white because he's going to lose this pawn, and these pawns are really hard to hold on to, and we have the 2-on-1 on the outside. And if he doesn't take, then we're just going to take sorry, if he pushes, then we take here, and if he doesn't take, which is what he does, then we can just make progress. So he pushed b5, and I brought my king here. My idea is simply, if he doesn't kick me out with rook here, I'm going to bring my king in here and just harass. King activity in the endgame is what it's all about. So right here, he has to play the rook move here, and then when I go king here, he has to go here, and mate is unstoppable on h3. So if he checked me, I would just have to go back. But instead, he plays a4, and now I get my king into g3. And my king is just a beast. I mean, it's just a monster. And this g4 pawn is just going to be so weak. So he takes, and he trades into a completely losing king and pawn endgame. So this is why it's really important that you calculate and know your endgames. Because we trade, we make sure that we take the d4 pawn because the g4 pawn is not going anywhere. He pushes here, and now it's very important that we stop all counterplay. We play a6, and now the position is actually -15, so completely lost for white. My opponent resigned here, but basically the plan is to take this pawn, push g5, h5, h4, g4, h3, pawn takes, and then we have an outside passer. I don't care if he goes and gobbles it up because I'll come win this pawn and then this pawn, and it'll just be Pac-Man mode. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's just clean win against white. Our plan was to play e5. We played e5, and then we attacked on the f file. Eventually, we created a weakness. We exploited the weakness, traded off pieces, and our king is dominating his king in this position. Our pawns are also super strong. Obviously, he made no progress on the queen side, and eventually he lost it in the center and on the king side. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. I thought it was an awesome game. My opponent was rated 2341 or 2348, basically 2350 before he lost. And we're working our way up to 2400. So catch you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.